Today we're very happy to have Chuck Cross talking about one of the greatest, possibly one of the most distinctive attractions in North County and in Old Poway Park. I've ridden on the Poway Midland Railroad myself, and I'm sure many people have over the past 2 decades. And George is the president of the Poway Midland Railroad Volunteers. He's also served on the Poway Parks Commission for a number of years, has been actively involved in his community, and has been one of the people, volunteers, who has helped to found and maintain this fascinating railroad, which he will describe for us in more detail now. So I'm very happy to welcome Chuck Cross.
Thank you, Vincent, for that stunning introduction. So, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
How many people have been to the Poway Midland Railroad? Just about everybody. Yeah, you too, Bob. I said Bob's in the back. Yes, Bob's a big part of what goes on down there as well. So, Poway Midland Railroad was founded a number of years. I do have some brochures over here in case you're interested. That's the basis of what we're talking about today. But we have our brochures here. It was founded, well, to go back to the beginning, the locomotive was built in 1907 because San Francisco had a giant earthquake. All of a sudden, they needed a lot of concrete. So this Cal-Portland Cement Company was in Contra Costa County, where the city of Concord is now located. And they had a mine there. They had a cement plant. And they bought 3 of these locomotives to work in the yard to haul the limestone to the crusher. I have some pictures of that our historical person dug up of them actually operating these things. So they had 3 of those, and then they also bought a full-size locomotive to take the finished product out to the Port Chicago, so it could be shipped over to San Francisco, turned into concrete and poured. So a lot of those streets, a lot of that concrete that's still there, this company made all that. So they operated there till about 1950, when they shut down. The 3 locomotives ended up in a scrapyard in South San Francisco for 10 years. There was a gentleman who came through, Charles Pollard, who owned a machine shop in Vista. If you look into the Vista Historical Society, that machine shop is still there. He bought that machine, he bought that locomotive and brought it down and put a tender and a coach on it in 1960. He died in 1963, and then in 1966 his family sold off the train, and the Porter family, who lived in Old Poway Park, bought it and brought it down there, and he would run it on and off here and there until 1979. And then he got too ill to do anything with it, and it sat for many years just rusting away. And then the city bought the property, I believe, in 1989, and decided, what should we do with this? This is a very interesting piece, but Bob Emery, I don't know if any of you knew him, but he was the one who pushed for it very hard, and they pulled the plug out of the bottom of the boiler, and all this rust and chunks of water, iron came out the bottom. I thought, what did we just buy? But they put it back in shape. When I started, it was sitting on blocks, the wheels were off of it, running gear was off, it was stripped. So it took us about a year worth of Saturdays to put it back on its wheels and plumb it the first time. So we got it up and running, and a couple of years ago we finally figured out that the boiler shell was too thin anymore. The state boiler inspector had us do an ultrasonic test. That boiler was actually replaced in 1937, so it lasted 80 years. And considering how neglected it was, it's amazing it lasted that long. With the water treatment program, we made it last a little longer. But the council decided that it's time to replace this historical object. And they weren't sure when they did this, but about $370,000 later, the boiler has arrived back on site, back on the locomotive. We found a contractor, Concord up in, not Concord, Commerce. Yes, they build boilers still for industrial applications, and they know how to build locomotive boilers. So they built it, it's back on site, we're finishing the plumbing. I don't know when exactly we'll have it out, because we have to have the state boiler inspector look at it, we have to do test runs, things like that. But it's coming along. So I would like to mention too that about 3 years ago we had some extra wheel sets in storage, and Bob Kaplan took the leadership on building this brand new coach, which is called the Rattlesnake Creek. We built it from the wheels up. The city had an extra set of wheels. Bob took the lead, and other people helped design and build, but Bob was the ramrod on that job. And it's a beautiful piece of work, and we can finally take disabled people. We bought a lift that was integral to the design. And the first time we ran it, there was a young man who'd been coming around for years in a wheelchair who'd never been able to ride. And we said, well, come on. And you couldn't wipe the smile off his face. But the reason I do it, the paycheck, is the children. You come around the corner, there's something about children, they have a connection to steam locomotives. I'm not sure what it is. I've always had one. Bob's always had one. You know, kids from 1 to 92, right?
Right.
So when I come around the corner, they're jumping up and down. Sometimes they're afraid to get on. But once they get on, you can't get them off. So it's just the closest thing to a living being that humans have ever made out of a machine. It breathes, it chuffs along, people can relate to it. So it's very difficult work, it's hot, it's very rewarding though to be able to do something like that. So we have some brochures over here. Our main attraction, of course, is our Baldwin steam locomotive. We usually run that on the first and third weekends of the month. It's not quite restored to service yet, but we're working on that. The city's going to make a big deal out of it, make a big party out of it when we reintroduce it to service. I can't give you a date on that yet. You can just watch our website, which is in the back of our brochure. So, other stuff that we have there. We have our 1894 LA yellow car trolley, which operates on some Sundays. That was built in 1894 for Los Angeles. Now has a Corvair engine hooked to a truck transmission with a chain drive on it that drives 8 tons worth with a flat 6 Corvair engine. So that was another piece of work to put back into shape, because that was all rotten when we got it off a private collector. It had been sitting in a barn in the Lucerne Valley for 20 years. Everything had to be torn down and rebuilt. Motor, wood was rotten, everything. Bob's been involved in that as well. Passenger coach, the first one we inherited, the Poway Valley, had been sitting out for years. It was loaded with termites. You could put your hand right through it. So we had to strip it down to the metal and start over again. So we had some very dedicated volunteers and retired folks who came down during the week. It took them about a year to do that, but we put new flooring in it. I came along and it was down to the subfloor sitting on blocks. It was just a steel frame. So we have the Fairmont Speeder, which is out running today. By the way, we have the Rendezvous running today up down and tomorrow down at Old Poway Park. That has 19th century reenactors in there, including the Frontier Army of the West from San Pasquale. They're robbing the train, and they brought their Gatling gun and their 3-pound mountain howitzer. We'll be doing demonstrations, as well as what it's like to live back in the 19th century. These people walk the walk and talk the talk. Thursday and Friday, we brought a lot of school kids through, 3rd grade in particular. There is a living history unit of California. The teachers come back year after year because they teach it later in the year. But we have a farmhouse down there. They churn butter. They get to pan for gold. They see how these people really lived. And when the teachers give this unit later in the year, this is real. They remember it. It really makes an impact as to what the early settlers lived like. So they're really fascinated with the chamber pot back there. That really gets attention. Ew!
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But the Fairmont Speeder is a 1950 track inspection vehicle. We restored it. It has a little 4-cylinder engine. Pulls our ore cars around. That's what we call gondola cars. That's what's running today. We tore those down and rebuilt those up from the ground up as well, with axles and bearings and wood and everything else. They were in decrepit condition. They were on the property. So the 1894 LA yellow car, we went out and acquired ourselves. That belongs to the volunteers. So the city didn't know about it until it was on the way. And they said, oh yeah, we're shoving a trolley in there. And I said, huh? But it was okay. Jim Bowersox was the city manager, and he loved trains, so that was okay. Again, I mentioned the Rattlesnake Creek that Bob had so much to do with. It's a beautiful car based on a design from the Oahu Land Company. It has a nice big back porch on it. The seats come out so you can turn it into a dance floor, put a band out there. There's a, we built it specifically for that purpose, a little bit wider. I've been talking to Jim Cunningham about running a wine train at night. He can't wait to do that. So, a dinner train. So, our president our president from years ago was a retired vice president of Grumman Aircraft. John was instrumental in designing and building the A6 Intruder and the E2 Hawkeye, which still fly. He got a turntable design. Now, those of you who know what turntables did back in the old days, now diesel engines can run in either direction. But you used to have to turn your locomotives around at one end or the other. This is a gallows-type turntable. It works. The city paid for that, and we also expanded the barn. So all of a sudden, we kept getting all this stuff. And there was no place to put it, so we submitted a design to the city, and they built the barn expansion, which meant moving the caboose, the boxcar. One thing led to another. It took quite a while to do all of this. We also, so sometimes we turn the equipment on that. It takes about one person to push it once you balance a piece of equipment on it. It's a center pivot. It's just how it's based on the one up in Law's Railroad Museum. We just scaled it down. We had a contractor build it. And he did a great job. We also have the our 1906 San Francisco cable car. Again, Bob had a great deal to do with getting that finished as well. That runs on a 96-volt motor with a transmission, and we split the axles, which is something Herb did, which made it possible for it to run all day. The wheels kind of wore out. We just had to replace a couple of the wheels, which was another fine project that poor Bob had to do, but he did a great job of it with the contractor, in spite of the contractor. But that, we inherited that in just trash shape. It worked at Knott's Berry Farm for 20 years. In 1976, the Metropolitan Transit District bought it, and they were going to put it on the line in the Old Town. Wrong gauge. They didn't think of that. So they couldn't adapt it. So it sat there and was rotting until about 20 years ago. They were about to throw it away. And one of our members was director of maintenance at the San Diego Trolley. Said, well, that can't happen. So our city manager wrote to San Diego city manager, says, you don't want it, we'll take it. He says, you pay to move it, you can have it. So we did. We put it in the barn, and it took us a long time to get it back in shape because all the wood was rotten, the termites had had a feast, we had to make all sorts of posts, we had to find people to do this. Very complex, and design a whole different drive system. It basically works like a Tesla underneath. So we're putting that back in commission shortly. So we also have some other interesting pieces there. They're not listed in the brochure that we have here, but we have an 1880s hot air expansion engine. They used to be all over the West. They burn just about anything. It's called a Stirling cycle. The whole theory was invented by an Englishman named Lord Stirling. It burns anything. It's just hot air expansion with 2 cylinders. They used to use them out. Sears actually used to sell them in their catalog back in the 19th century. Where you didn't have any place on the electrical grid, they could be used to pump water up, either to a water tower out in the middle of nowhere, or for your cattle, or whatever purpose you needed to get the water out of the ground. You could burn coal, whatever. That one functions. We have a single-cylinder gasoline reversible engine that was put on a speeder about the early 1900s. That engine has been put into operational shape as well, called the Pop and Johnny, makes a racket. Here about 10 miles away, and it burns a lot of oil. It's a 2-stroke. So whenever mosquitoes are around, those are dead by the time we finish with them. But we have a lot of things like that. We have our wigwags that we inherited, that those are mechanical flagmen, and we've got one mounted and functioning out there. It took us a while to do that, but Bob was part of that as well. He understands the theory with them. And we have another one in the shop that we're going to be working on, but that we installed sensors for that. And we got the depot built. I mean, the council and the people of Poway have been tremendous. We thought at the beginning this would be kind of a local thing. The kids would show up, parents would put them on the train, and that was it. It turns out we carried more adults than children. Over the last 20-odd years, everybody wants to go for a ride. Saturday mornings, the farmer's market is in the street down there. That's an addition that the city made. Apparently, from what I understand, it's the second largest farmer's market in the county. The only one bigger for some of these vendors is the one down in Old Town in Little Italy. But they, yeah, that's what you were telling me, yeah. And the vendors are crazy, they have more vendors than they have spots for them. They block off the street on the middle of the road on Saturday morning from 8 to 1, fresh produce and all kinds of things. It's amazing what they have there, and that's just turned that park into a destination. So I would encourage you to go down there and get your fresh vegetables, go for a train ride, get a little living history in the Nelson House. Jan's part of that group with the Historical Museum, and that's next to the hamburger factory down there. We're all in partnership with our entire group, number of groups down there. So we all work very well together to promote each other. And it's really a very remarkable piece of work that the city has decided to have a focus. This was actually the center of Old Poway. That was not down on Poway Road. This Old Poway was the center of Poway. So they bought this whole area. They spent a fortune on it, about $35 million altogether, upgrading all the utilities and everything else to make this community have a focal point. That's what they did. So, any questions on? Yes, ma'am.
When you were rebuilding the old engine,
Yes.
do you have, or any of the old pieces, do you have trouble getting parts, or do you create? And also, my second question,
Yes.
what about the tools?
The tools, some of them you can adapt them. Sometimes we make them. We have a mill and a lathe and welders, and we have some people who had skills with that. In terms of parts, especially threaded parts, because some of them were kind of weird, we had to call on the machine shops to do that, to find local vendors who can do that. It's very difficult. So fortunately, when we were putting it together, this man who was the president, that was vice president of Grumman Aircraft, understood metallurgy and everything else. He was a trained nut as well. So he brought his knowledge in there, and we were able to get the right metals and the right stuff and find the vendors. It's always a challenge to find vendors.
Do you communicate with other train places like Durango and any of the other old train places?
We are part of the Association of Tourist Railroads and Museums, ATRRM, and we do network with them. There's a guy in Colorado in particular that we've gotten a lot of things from, like our lubricator for our locomotive and some other things, valves, other things like that, that Bernie Watts only has back in Backshop Enterprises in Colorado. Everybody knows him in the business. I've been to Durango and Silverton, and I talked to their chief mechanical officer, and we talked about the resources we have in common.
Yeah.
They have a shop up there. It's very nice.
Yeah.
But we have a pretty good shop of our own in terms of the wood shop and metal shop. So our volunteers come in, and they've just done a wonderful job over the years of redoing all of this stuff. But yes, it is a challenge sometimes to get the parts. And you have to understand what's a steam part and what's not. Timing the locomotive was another piece of work, because that's fairly complex.
Oh, okay.
But John Oler and Don Haynes understood that, and they got it done. And it has to do with the pin on the wheel and the D valve on top of the cylinder. There's lap and lead and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's very difficult to time these things, but they got it done. So we've been very fortunate over the years to have a lot of really tremendous volunteers, that other people who've worked on other steam locomotives, and we do have resources we can reach out to get answers. These people who rebuilt the boiler up in Commerce in particular, who worked on the ones for Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm, they've been doing this a long time. Emil Miller in particular has been at this a long time. He knows how to do stay-bolts, all that stuff. These are very arcane things nowadays. There's not a lot of call for them, but there are some people out there. You just have to reach out. Any other questions? Sir?
Do you have a relationship with the Antique Gas and Steam Engine Museum?
We have a couple of our members that are members of that as well. and we can reach out to them if we need something. They have some stuff that we don't. It's a little bit different in terms of what they have on their property, but they have steam and gas engines just like we do. Greg Hoyle in particular is our liaison up there, and he's down at the barn working today on a lot of the piping and plumbing. But yeah, we relate to them as well, and if we can help them, then we help them, and sometimes they help us as well. So we have a good working relationship all around. Any other questions? Sir?
It sounds like you're like a line item in the city of Poway budget. Can you elaborate a little more on your funding? How do you?
Yes.
How does that work, and where does it come from?
We are a 501c3 corporation that the city had formed. They cover us for workman's comp and disability. We sit down with the city every year. We have a very detailed facilities use agreement. They cover us for workman's comp and disability. So that's the major part of what the city pays for, as well as the building, the electricity, the water. That's part of the Parks and Rec department. There is no paid staff. There is paid staff at the park, but that's not all they do. They have weddings down there and graduations, and all sorts of events happen at Old Poway Park. They rent some of those facilities out. It's a rare weekend when there is not a wedding there. That's how they help us offset the cost. In terms of the $370,000 for the boiler, the city put up the money to start with, and over the next 15 years, we're going to repay them half the cost on what we collect from ticket fares, from ticket sales. We buy our own fuel and parts and tools, and we bought our own air compressors, and thousands of dollars worth of tools and welders and all that kind of stuff, oil, fuel, all that stuff, water treatment. That's all out of our pocket. The city sits down with us every so often and goes over our P&L and our balance sheet. They know what that is, and we go over in advance what we might expect out of the city in a budget in the coming year. They do allocate some funds because they do own the equipment. So the idea originally was to have the railroad generate enough funds to be self-sufficient, and it's not far off from that. But some of this stuff is like this particular item is not something we could have financed ourselves. So, but this is important enough to all the city council members that they did vote in favor of doing this. But we are going to pay them back for about $180,000 over the next 15 years to offset the cost. So, yes, sir.
So your volunteers fit into the Poway volunteer system?
Yes, we're integrally part of that. We have to pass our background checks and everything else, just like the park rangers. And
Yeah, we usher at the center.
It's the same thing.
And we're part of that structure.
That's correct. It's the same structure.
Very well done, actually.
That's exactly right. So you're familiar with that. Yeah, there's a line item for the Arts Center as well, and that's always a contentious issue, isn't it? Yes, it is. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, sir.
See, I haven't been in Holly Park for some years, but I recall we had this narrow gauge locomotive went around the park,
That's correct.
and that was what was in the Concord concrete.
Yes, that was the Cal Portland Cement Company in Concord.
Now, it's still operating, I assume.
Well, we're putting it back into operation condition now.
I also recall there was a large locomotive inside the shed.
No, this is the same one. There's only one locomotive.
I thought there was almost like a Civil War locomotive in the shed.
Well, it kind of looks like it, but it's not. No, that's the one that the city inherited on the property that Colonel Porter had. So there's only one locomotive. There's the speeder, the yellow car trolley, the cable car. There's a lot of stuff that we've collected over the years as well. And someone described it on a website as a place to make somebody who likes mechanical objects that would make their mouth water, because there's all kinds of odd stuff in there that we've preserved.
What is now in the barn?
The steam locomotive is now in the barn with its tender in the car, passenger car. And the next bay over is the trolley, and then the San Francisco cable car, and the next bay over is the speeder of your cars, and then we have one other passenger car over to one side. Anything else, sir? Sir?
What about the track? How did that track come to be laid, and did it ever connect anywhere outside of Mountain?
No, when Colonel Porter owned the property, he had like 20-pound rail, these real skinny rails, and he just kept it inside the park. had like a loop track. I knew people who helped him run it, and it was not very well constructed, and sometimes the rails would tip over, and then have to jack up the train, pound it back in shape, get it going again. So it was not something he did very often or very well. When the city inherited the property, there was no track on it, so they designed the track system. Now, all that rail most of it's from the 19th century. It came off Vandenberg Air Force Base. It's 65-pound rail. Rail is measured by the yard. That's how they weigh it, by the yard. The 20-pound rail is pretty little stuff. 20 pounds per yard is what it weighs. It comes in 20-foot sections. So it's about 140 pounds for a 20-foot section. With a 65-pound rail, that's about 450 pounds, as we all know from lugging it around, Bob.
Yes.
Yes, that'll kill your back. We have tongs to pick it up with, but that doesn't make it any lighter. That was designed, and a contractor came down. That was an integral part of the park's design, is to have it go around the park. And a contractor came and put that in. They didn't do a really good job. We did get the MTS crew up with an engineer to get it straightened out in terms of the way they installed switches and turnouts and things like that. They didn't do a great job, but the city had them come up and do that. Every so often we have to replace ties. It was built as a 3'6", which is not standard gauge, but that's kind of a streetcar gauge or a mining gauge. That's the standard gauge in New Zealand and Japan, by the way. So I believe it is also the standard gauge in Australia. Saves a lot on ties when you build it. When you went through mountains like Durango and Silverton, it's a 3-foot gauge because they're going through mountains, and that makes a big difference. Is how much of the mountain you have to tear down to make the train go around it. So it's a good deal narrower. So, but yeah, that all that rail is marked on the tang ends as to who made it and when. And we've had track experts come out and assess that rail as well. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you're almost leading into that. You talk a little bit about your safety inspection program and whatnot, both in terms of equipment and the track.
We have we've always had a very active safety program among ourselves that we've worked out with the city in terms of keeping it. Before we operate a train on a given day, we walk the track to make sure no one's unbolted it or put hazards in there or, blocked up the flange ways to make the train derail. Every so often we go out and we measure the gauge, and when it needs some work, then we do get contractors in there. Like last year, we replaced about 200 of those railroad ties that were rotten, because then it'll go out of gauge, both in and out, especially since it's almost all curves. That makes it another challenge there. And in terms of the barn itself, we have a very active program with the city to come in and have a regular inspection on the barn itself. In terms of fire extinguishers, there's sprinklers, tripping hazards, all that stuff. We've always been very active with that. So we have one of our members who's our membership chair, and he's our safety manager. He used to run cranes down at Public Works downtown. So he's very conscious of safety, but yes, safety is our most important product. So we're very proactive at that. It's a good day if no one gets injured and everyone has a good time. Sir?
You mentioned workers' compensation and another item. Does that mean you have some paid employees in the operation?
What we are considered as uncompensated employees for the city of Poway. We do pay our storekeepers, because otherwise no one would do the job, which is largely what we have teenagers for. Because it's pretty frantic on there on a Saturday morning with lots of kids yelling and screaming and jumping up and down. We have a play table there. We sell some toys in there. It's a racket in there. Nobody really understands that till they go stand there for about half an hour.
Noisy racket.
It's a
illegal racket.
That's correct. It's a very noisy racket with little kids. But we cover them ourselves by the railroad. We have payroll. It's a corporation. It's a business. My wife is the vice president of finance and administration is her title. So every Saturday morning I have to get the cash box down there, pick it up Saturday afternoons and get it there Sunday morning and pull it back Sunday afternoon, because that's the beginning of our accounting system. And again, we have to hire a special accountant that specializes in nonprofits, because that's a different way of accounting for altogether. And we have to pay them about $800 a year to do our tax return.
Yeah.
So we were audited by the IRS one year, and they were really just pleased as punch, because My wife keeps receipts on everything.
Yeah.
And the lady said, "Receipts? This is really good." She said, "I want to see this year and this month." And pull it out and look at that, because a lot of people take nonprofits and use them as sort of a piggy bank.
Yeah.
And when you start writing checks to individuals without backup paperwork, the IRS doesn't like that. But we have all that covered.
Yeah. I'm
Yes, sir.
smiling because I'm the treasurer for this outfit here. And there's a number of board members here that appreciate what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that.
Exactly, and it's very different than,
It's very different. It's a business like any other. We have employees that we pay workman's comp and disability for the ones in the store. They're just part-timers, but it's always a challenge getting kids because they drive my wife crazy, because that's the beginning of the bookkeeping system. And if they don't put it in the register right to start with, then she has to figure out how they screwed it up.
give us an idea how many people are involved in terms of membership and active,
We
besides
probably-
Bob's obviously. But
Probably have at any given time about 35 to 40 people who are active members. We sell passes for people, annual passes for families. It's like $35 to ride the train all year if you want. They just bring the pass in and put them on the train. That's something we've always been very big on, is get an attractive place for young families, and that's very big for the city as well. So, that's how we do that. Safety is, again, our most important product. So before you sit down on the train, you get a safety speech from the conductor. It's a long process to get to be a conductor and an engineer, and especially to operate the steam locomotive. I'm going to have to retrain everybody because it's going to operate differently. Me and another guy are working on that because we don't know what it'll act like until we fire it up and see. But as the guy who put it in Commerce, he says, well, everyone's going to have to forget their muscle memory on how this works and go into paying attention, because it's going to be different no matter what. You can take two of these things that are identical and they're going to behave differently because that's the way the stuff is. Sir?
You mentioned earlier about somebody who was an employee who was paid to walk the rails to check them.
Our volunteers do that.
But I wonder if the old railroads did that.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking of an expression, and I don't know if it's an old expression in old songs, or describing somebody as a cross-tie walker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably related to
That's what it
railroads.
is. They would be
Okay.
called Gandy dancers, cross-tie walkers.
So
That's the
all-
Gandy company made the tools.
Okay.
That's where Gandy dancer comes from. But the speeder in particular was a track inspection vehicle. And what they would do was go out and check the signal systems in the track before they put the big train out there. They had hand cars originally, because then 4 guys could pick it up and move it off the track so the train didn't squash it. So, but they're dangerous. We have one actually. We made one. City won't let it out on the track, and I don't blame them. If you fall off it, it's either fatal or you're badly injured.
Yeah.
But it works. But it's a beautiful piece of work, but it's very dangerous. But they would put that out there before the trains went out, and they would put out, the speeder would go out with like a work car with tools and workmen to inspect the signal systems, the grade crossings, all that stuff. So railroads have always done that because people have always had mischief on their mind. Something else that we also do there is we present Operation Lifesaver to young people. So we bring kids in. That's a national program. We don't charge for it. It teaches young people, and we'll teach adults too, bus drivers, truck drivers, whatever, what it means to have grade crossing safety. This was introduced on a national level about 30 years ago, and it's cut down on the disasters at grade crossings and fatalities and accidents by about half, because it makes people more conscious, and we figure we get the kids when they're young. There's a video in there of Sly Fox and Birdie, and Sly Fox is like the Wile E. Coyote. He gets crushed a lot, and Birdie keeps telling him, don't do that, and he says, I'm going to do it anyway, and he gets squashed. But the kids then learn about it. They take a workbook with them to reinforce what they learn. They go for a train ride, as well as looking at all the historical stuff that we have, the Historical Society's 2 buildings in Poway Park. They do that tour as well. And that's a very big part of what we do. We've done that with thousands of school children over the years. Before we even laid the track and ran a train, we had an Operation Lifesaver chapter that was active with the old Poway Minden Railroad. We figured that's part of the public supports us. It's very important to give back to the community. Sometimes the groups that put on music and stuff need a little financial support, and we'll help with that. You know, like with the train, it's called the working on the railroad. But they needed some money for the entertainers. for the
Oh, the
musicians.
Train Song Festival.
Well, they don't call it that anymore.
Oh, they
Someone in
don't?
City Hall doesn't like the Train Song Festival. We're hoping they retire and we can bring that title back. But we're not allowed to call it that, unfortunately. That's what it is.
Someone doesn't arrange it.
But I'm not sure who it is, but someone doesn't like it. And so we're not allowed to call it that, whatever. But that's basically what it is. We just had that recently, and they do have to pay some of the professional performers to come in, and they come to us, and we do help with that. So, all the groups in Old Poway Park, I'm part of the Old Poway Park Activities Committee, Action Committee. We put on Halloween, we put on Christmas in the Park. Like I said, you look at our website, that gives the description of all the special events that take place there. The Halloween it's called Once Upon a Halloween. It's the Sunday before Halloween every year. We started doing it on the actual Halloween years ago, and nobody showed up. Yeah, they're out trick-or-treating. So we finally figured it out, and we do it the Sunday before the actual Halloween. That way the adults have had the party the night before, so they bring out the costumes again. And the kids are trying out the costumes for Halloween to come. And it's fabulous. There's thousands of people there. The Ghostbusters car is going to be there. There's pumpkin stuff. There's a haunted house. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. They always need volunteers for that as well if you're interested in doing that. Lynn Woolsey's in charge of that. And it's a tremendous event. Christmas in the Park, we bring with Santa by train at about 5:30. And
This weekend. This weekend, rendezvous.
oh, I thought I'd mention Rendezvous this weekend, but that's where the 19th century reenactors are camped down there. You can go down there tonight. They're cooking food. They really like this place because most of the places they go are on dirt lots out in the middle of East Chibet. This place has grass. There's a bathroom right there. There's a restaurant there, and then there's the liquor store down the street. Don't forget that.
It wouldn't be authentic frontier.
Well, golly, no. So it's really quite an event. Sir?
I was also reminded, we had somebody here yesterday who had grown up on a ranch when this was still ranching country. And I was reminded about steam technology that was used in the early farm equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, I think, you see notices, as some have done a lot of research in old newspapers, you see notices about threshing events, where somebody who owns a big threshing rig will come around to a farm and do the threshing of the crop for that. That's
They
what
have some of those machines up at Vista.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do, and they operate them because they were too big for any individual farmer to own.
One farmer who could afford it, and he used to go out to different properties. His name was Nordahl. That's where the Nordahl Road comes from.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's where a lot of that comes from. That's correct. But they have a lot of those up at Vista Gas and Steam Engine Museum, and I believe they have some weekends coming up shortly where they operate those things,
Yeah.
along with a lot of their hit and miss engines and a lot of other stuff like that. Hot air expansion engines. The engines are sitting there with the governors spinning around, and they have tractors that go up and down the street that run on steam as well as gas. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, that equipment was too expensive for any particular farmer to own, so they would go around and thresh it. I'm sure some money changed hands or whatever, but that's how it was done back then, and it's done that way still to a certain extent. Any other questions, sir?
The gauge you mentioned is a narrow gauge railway.
It's 3'6".
There's the National Railway in New Zealand told on narrow gauge.
It's 3'6".
Yes,
Yes.
that's it. So you can run your locomotive and drive on
And in Japan as well.
and Australia you mentioned.
I think Australia has the same gauge. I've been told that. I haven't been there, so I don't know. But that's how they save money on ties. Now, true narrow gauge is 3 foot or less. This was called mining gauge, streetcar gauge, or basket gauge, depending on the choice on the term you chose to use on it. But it's an unusual gauge, so it's very hard to find other equipment that fits on our track unless we go to Australia or New Zealand.
But they have the same gauge you have.
Yes.
Did you ever hear of George Hilton's book on the narrow railways?
I have not. We have quite a library down at the park, by the way, about 500 books.
You might look it up.
Okay.
He wrote 14 books, one of which was on the narrow gauge railway.
Yeah, we might have that collection because our historian was an Englishman and he collected about 550 books that I did manage to classify and put in the library in our depot. So it's quite a collection. So, but yeah, there are historical series on all those railroads, especially from England. They had so many over there and they chronicled them, and they have a very active steam program in England where it's a national program to keep these steam railways up and running. Any other questions, ma'am?
Do you have many, I'm going to say young, but I don't mean little kids, like early 20-year-old men, young teenage boys who are interested in this?
There's one down there working today with William Pham. He's down there working today with Greg.
Good.
We've had a lot of young people who come along.
That's nice.
One of our members, he's our vice president of operations, his son came along at age 5. Because you can bring your child that's 5 years old to be a conductor. They can work in the shop later when they're teenagers, as long as they pass all the safety tests and all that stuff. So William is there today learning how to do copper tubing from Great Oil.
That's really good.
So, oh yeah, we get this. My son started there when they were 11 and 13. And they can walk into this barn, and they're 35 and 38 now, and they can walk in and say, I helped build this, and this, and this, and this, and this. It's still there.
And are they still interested?
Oh yes,
Of course, they get busy with.
well, they
life.
get busy with other parts of younger son lives in Northern California now. My older son has a large skill set in terms of welding and metalwork. We have him come in and work on this stuff, and we're very glad he's been able to do that. Because you have to have that kind of knowledge and know how to use welders and metal and stuff like that to keep things moving. So, but yes, we've had a lot of young people. I saw Carl Gruber showed up with his daughter early this morning. He'll be working this afternoon. His daughter's about 6.
Super.
And yes, one of our big goals is to get young people involved, because that's the only way that this will continue.
Sure.
So we're very family friendly, and we don't throw 3 parties a year. My wife wouldn't have it any other way. A holiday party, 4th of July, and then the installation dinner for the officers. We held 3 good team building. They're team building sessions, but everybody gets together when they're dressed up and clean, and we all get in the same room and have a very good time. So that's an important aspect of what we do. Anything else? Sir?
I'm just kind of curious, since it's basically a continuous right turn, do you have undue wear on your wheels and in case locomotive tires?
Yes, we do. And with the trolley in particular, we solved some of that with the water sprayer system. That was an old logging railroad trick that John Miller brought to us. It was screaming going around the curves. So we put a water tank with a windshield washer motor and a foot switch with irrigation sprayers on the wheels. It works. We're putting that system on the cable car now because we had undue wear on the lead truck, because that's the steering truck. So they were coming down today to go through under the seats and make sure what they had mocked up would fit. So we've got the spray system largely installed. We just have to have the water tank involved. Sometimes we've been doing that with the trolley for years. And some people see us put the water hose on there and say, what are you doing? I said, this thing runs on water. And they're like, yeah, sure. Some of the kids say, oh, yeah, wow, cool. So we have a little fun like that. But yeah, when our vice president of operations, his son started at age 5. He's now a 20-year-old junior studying chemical engineering at Caltech, Berkeley. So yeah, we like to bring families in, because it's a family activity that, the kids can come and hang out. We have several, Evan and his mom, she's a doctor. She comes in on Sundays. Her son helps her punch tickets and helps run the train. It's very important to these kids. They get a t-shirt like this, and we give them a little hour pin every year. We track their hours. And they go to school, and they're like, I'm a volunteer. I get to do things adults do. Well, and then they have to learn how to do it right, too. That's something they don't get to do very many places. They get to be docents and have to learn the history of everything and how to do things safely and how to handle this mill safely around moving equipment. It's dangerous stuff if you do it wrong. And it really makes an impression on them. Anything else?
This water thing on the wheels,
Yes.
is that at 120 for the whole?
Every time you go around a curve, you step on the foot switch and spray it.
It comes from the same stuff.
Yes.
It's not, okay, so
Yes, sir.
it's all curves in there.
Pretty much. So you pretty much got your foot on it. There aren't many straight sections there. You're absolutely right. You're right. So yes, but that's something logging railroads used to do to minimize the wear on their locomotives on all the tight curves they would do and switchbacks, and would also keep the sparking down and keep them from burning the forest. So John Oler knew about that and said, well, why don't we try that? And it works. So,
The track will tell you very quickly if you don't have your foot on the switch.
yes, it screams at you.
That squeal will drive you crazy.
Oh, the cable car, the trolley in particular, was a long single fixed truck. So it was howling. We tried putting a little track grease on there, and then we couldn't climb the hill.
Oh.
So we had to wipe all that off. Yes. Then we tried dish soap. Well, that's as bad as oil. So we just put water on it. And then it dries up. It makes the rails a little rusty, it makes them a little squeaky, but that's just part of rail music as far as we're concerned. Anything else? Wow, what a great group. Give yourselves a round of applause.